Thank you, Chair. The Committee of Adjustment is holding a public hearing in accordance with Section 45 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990 as amended, in order to consider an application for relief from Bylaw 2009-021, being the comprehensive zoning bylaw for the Township of Selwyn. The prescribed notice of the public meeting was provided by prepaid first-class mail to all residents within a 60-meter radius of the subject property. Ministry and agencies were circulated via email. The subject property was posted with a sign advertising the public hearing. The notice was also available on the township website. The notice complies with the requirements of the Planning Act. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at the public hearing or make written submissions to the Committee of Adjustment of the Township of Selwyn before the variance is granted, the person or public body may not be entitled to appeal the decision of the Committee of Adjustment of the Township of Selwyn to the Ontario Land Tribunal. If you wish to be notified of the decision of the Committee of Adjustment of the Township of Selwyn on the proposed minor variance, you must make written request to the Secretary Treasurer of the Committee of Adjustment of the Township of Shoreline by mail, fax, email, or Dropbox. So we only have one application tonight. It is for file number A35-21 for Paul Gray. This is in 16 William Street in Lakefield. The proposal is for a 433 approximately square foot detached garage. The reliefs being requested are to decrease the minimum interior side yard setback from 1.2 meters to 1 meter, to increase the maximum accessory building lot coverage from 7.5 to 15.1%, and to increase the maximum permitted lot coverage of all buildings and structures from 30% to 30.22%. We have comments of no concern, agency comments of no concern from the Kawartha Pine Ridge District School Board, Peterborough Public Health, and the Autonomy Region Conservation Authority. And as noted in my report on this file, I find that the application meets the 4 tests of a minor variance. So if there's any questions on this file, I'd be happy to take those.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, is there anyone on the line to speak to this application?
No, there isn't.
Is there anyone to speak against it?
No, there isn't.
Thank you very much. I'll bring it to committee. Are there any questions? Seeing none, I would ask for a mover. Anita and Jerry, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Minutes of the October 26, 2021 meeting. Donna, Andy, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And a motion to adjourn. Our next meeting is February the 22nd. No, it isn't. Yeah, December 7th. We're jumping ahead in the year, I see. Anyway, our next meeting is December the 7th. So for adjournment, Jerry and Anita, all in favor? It's carried. Thank you.
Okay, colleagues, I'm going to call the regular council meeting of November 23rd to order. And we'll begin with our land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that we are on the treaty and traditional territory of the Mississauga and Ajabec. We offer our gratitude to the First Peoples for their care for and teachings about our earth and our relations. May we honor those teachings. And I'd ask everybody to observe a moment of silence so that council staff and members of the public can quietly reflect on our duty to the community that we are trying to serve. Thank you, colleagues. Members of the public, staff, presenters, and members of the council, please be advised that the meetings are broadcast and recorded and made available on the internet. Is there any declaration of pecuniary interest? Clerk, please note there are none. We'll move to the minutes. We have the minutes that were circulated for the November the 9th, 2021 meeting. Moved by Sherry, seconded by Anita. Any discussion? All in favor? Those minutes are carried. So we will go then to our deputation. It's scheduled for 6:05, so I'm not sure if they're online, but we'll just wait for a second and see if they are. Let's give it a second. Here they are. Perfect.
Unmute yourself, Rob.
Here we go.
There you go.
Okay.
So this evening we have Rosalind and Rob who are making a presentation on behalf of the Environment Council for Clear, Stony and White Lakes. And I'll turn the floor over to you and ask that you, our delegations last for 10 minutes. And then after that, I'll open it up to council if they have any questions for you. So the floor is yours. Please proceed.
Thank you. I am having a little trouble hearing you. Am I coming through clearly, Your Honor?
You are, Rob. You are.
Okay. Thank you very much. Well, I'd like to say good evening to Your Honor and to members of council. My name is Rob Little, and I'm here tonight as past president of the Environment Council for Clear, Stony, and White Lakes. Our council's been involved in environmental concerns in this area, going on 30 years now. We're a nonprofit, volunteer-driven organization. Indeed, one of the people that we have learned a great deal from is your own Rob Lamar, who attends our meetings when you're not keeping him too busy in the office. Okay, I think Tanya, I'm on the second slide now. Yeah, I just wanted to mention that in addition to our being speaking tonight, we are also speaking for 5 other associations in the township of Selwyn. And this is the first of 2 presentations. We hope to be able to do the second one on January the 18th. Now, could we go back, please, on the slides?
That is.
This is the good. All right, thank you. You can see down on the left-hand side, and members of council will know how important our clean and productive lakes are for tourism in the area. In fact, the last figures that we have are from 2018, and They say that the county of Peterborough during that time had an income of $348 million through tourism. Next slide, please. We know property values are rising everywhere, and not the least on lakefront properties. As somebody said, you know, there's only so much land, and there are only so many lakefront properties that they're not building anymore. So as a township, you will recognize the value to you for from the lakefront properties. Indeed, if you look at the your tax base, 30% of your cottages and homes, and 30% are the percentage of waterfront, that contribute 41% of your tax base. So it certainly benefits a township to maintain good water for the people who live on it. Next, please. And another one quickly. Oh, I see. Okay, we just have the two of them. Maybe we could flip back, can you just flip back to one of them? The lower right-hand corner, and then the next one. And there we go. Thank you very much. These are 3 pictures that were taken last summer on our lakes. And you can see what is happening here is that the construction just starts at the top of the hill, and it clear cut right down to the water's edge, so that when you reach the edge of the water, the shoreline has been greatly disturbed. And we're seeing more and more of this kind of thing on our lakes. Next, please. In the 1850s, 1860s, people began to camp on the islands and the land around the lakes in our area. And by 1880, properties were being created by the townships. Now, if you think the 1880s, the early 1900s, travel was done mostly by canoe. Electricity wasn't in yet. In fact, most of the electricity through this area was put in around 1955. People didn't have septic systems. We used the old buckets. We didn't have electricity to cool things, so we used the chunks of ice that a local person would have cut in the wintertime, and we'd go down to the shed and get it, and then it would be in sawdust and bring it back. So 50 feet at that time was a sufficient shoreline. However, you know that as the years went on, and as we got boats and as we got electricity, the demands on the land increased, and to the point of where we have a number of areas on all our lakes, 3 lakes, that look like this, that there's almost no shoreline left. Next, please. This picture is in here because we wanted to show the ridge where the water and the land meet. In nature, you start at the water's edge and go upland. The first 10 or 15 meters, and if you start at the water's edge, you go into the water, the first 10 or 15 meters, is a natural zone, riparian zone. However, policy does not recognize this zone. the land and the upland from the water have traditionally been the responsibility of the township. And once you get down to the water's edge, it's somebody else's business. It's either Orcas or Trans-Severn or Ministry of Natural Resources. And so the policy that we have, that has been developed, does not take the nature into consideration. And therefore, the place where the water and the shoreline meet have been considered as separate when nature does not see them as separate. Next, please. Very quickly, on the left, a drawing of the natural shoreline, and on the right, a disturbed shoreline. The natural shoreline, when it rains or snows, because there are plants and shrubs, about half the water soaks into the ground, another 40% evaporates, and only 10% is a runoff. However, you can see the disturbed shoreline, the plants and grasses have been removed and probably hardened, and probably in addition, the hardening now is a lawn coming down into the water, so that the only about 15% can infiltrate, soak into the ground. Another 30% evaporates, but 55%, over half of the moisture that falls, runs into the lake, into the water, and brings with it whatever pesticides, fertilizers have been put on that land. All right, Roz, you're up.
Okay, next, please. Next slide. Thank you. All the zones are interconnected. These zones that you're reading about here, the littoral zone, the riparian zone, the uplands, and deep water, they all have a relationship to one another in one way or another. One thing I want to mention is that when we talk about all of those zones put together, we're talking about shorelands because it's also including uplands. And they do touch down on the mainland. So riparian and littoral zones are different. The littoral zone is 0 to 3 meters deep in shallow water. The riparian zone is 10 to 15 meters up from the shoreline, and often referred to as the ribbon of life, as Rob just read a few minutes ago. When kept in natural state, these two zones protect water quality, and both zones support fish, wildlife, plants, birds, mammals, and other macroorganisms. Deep water provides habitat for fish and other aquatic species. Uplands are part of the shorelands ecosystem and provide a source of protection to shoreline features by way of appropriate landscaping and planting of vegetation to offset erosion and provide habitat. But they also provide an important source of negative impact. Fertilizers, erosion, septic runoff affecting both riparian and littoral zones, water quality, and eventually deep water is impacted by the decline in support for aquatic species. Next, please. Shoreline problems. Add to the list on bullet number 2 is blue-green algae, which is a toxic species found on our lakes more and more recently. This is something that we really need to be very, very aware of. There were 5 incidents, species found on sightings alone on Clear Lake this summer, and probably more than that in our lakes. The causes of the problems are listed there. Sources: fertilizer use, leaky septic systems, soil erosion, destruction or removal of riparian or littoral zone features. And the one that gets a lot of attention is leaky septic systems. There is a critical need for municipal implementation of septic reinspection programs to address this issue, and it is by no means a resolved problem at this point. Next, please. Here are a couple of best management practices for residents. The earlier photo of 3 properties on Clear Lake and this photo illustrate the growing trend for upgrading shoreline, resulting in total loss of natural features and functions. This is what we wish to avoid. Next, please. Education and restoration alone can't prevent or offset damage. There is currently, and has been in the past few years, a search for new tools. Municipalities and conservation authorities in Ontario are focused on developing new policies for conservation and restoration of shorelines on lakes and rivers. Studies provide evidence, however, that these changes are required, as older policies and lack of enforcement have not provided adequate protection to date. Next, please. This study, called The Future of Our Shores, reflects the growing concern about the need for shoreline protection. Please take a good look at this study that's provided by the Watersheds Canada. You can get that on their website, and it's listed in our reference document distributed to the council prior to this meeting. Many other sources are available to talk about these issues, but this one is very interesting given the number of associations, officials, and planners who combined all of their experience and their approach to this problem. Okay, merging goals. Next one, good, thank you. So we are pleased to see that we are having goals that merge together with Selwyn. We're not surprised, but we're happy to see that. And we're looking forward to discussions on these policies, the strategic plan and the climate change action plan. Hopefully we can have a conversation during our next session. So we'll close today, next please, by looking at our main messages. I want to look at the second one in particular. Shoreline education for property owners and contractors is critical and requires support via municipal policy and enforcement. This is our basic message. And as you know, this has been our first deputation focused on education. Our next one will be on January 18th. We'll close today by stressing the need for, as we said, education. And the whole goal here is to arrive at something that produces a 75% protection for our shorelines within a 30-meter setback. This is a goal that's widely supported by science and many municipalities in Ontario. So in closing, we want to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today, and we're looking forward to meeting with you in January. Deputation number 2 will focus on policy options being planned, are in the process of review, or currently implemented by other Ontario municipalities. Research and mapping outcomes on our lakes reflecting remaining natural shorelines versus altered shorelines will also be provided. I'm pleased to introduce our next guest volunteer, Mike Hendren, who is here to respond to council questions. Mike is a registered professional planner.
If I could just interrupt you, we're well past 15 minutes now, so I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up the presentation. So.
Okay, so are you going, Mike is here for questions. Will he be provided?
Yeah, we all know Mike.
I don't see Mike here. Oh, there you are. Okay. So Mike has experience as a 10-year executive director of Kawartha Land Trust, current member on the Environment Council, and he will answer questions.
Hi, Mike.
Since you all know me, feel free to throw any tomatoes anytime you desire.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. And we have our 3 guests there. So Anita.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was interested in seeing that one picture, I think it was like the 3rd slide in or something, where a lot of excavation had been done, and then it looked like armor stone or some kind of hardening of the shoreline. So having been in discussions or working with Rob Lamar, how is Selwyn's policies different than Duro Dummer's? Because it's Duro Dummer and Selwyn makes basically that's part of this stony, clear and white lake, correct?
Mike, is that,
I think that was a question directed for Rob Lamar, asking the difference between Duro Dummer and Selwyn policies.
Well, yeah, so I'm not really equipped to answer the question as to what the differences are. I'm not all that familiar with Duro Dummer's policies, to be honest. There are, other municipalities as well that border Stony Lake. North Kawartha does border as well. So their policies would have some impact on the health of the lake as well. What I can say is that the municipality did broach the issue. Hello, sorry. The municipality did broach the issue of adopting a septic inspection protocol. In the end, the municipality just wasn't convinced, I guess, that the magnitude of the costs would result in the type of impact that was anticipated in terms of the reduction in phosphates or phosphorus. I think we have a reasonable sense of what the inputs, phosphorus inputs are on Pigeon Lake. And only a small portion of that lake is impacted by septic systems. There's quite a bit of input from other factors that we might be better served to concentrate on. So I think that kind of, I guess, had us shy away from implementing the septic inspection protocol. We have an understanding of what the rates are in the lakes, but we don't have a really clear understanding of the percentage of input from the various sources, be they agriculture, be they just atmospheric and or septic systems. So I guess that's a brief answer to our policies as they relate to septic. Now we have adopted policies where we had the opportunity to require site plan approval for residential applications. So there are 3 subdivisions in the township whereby developments on waterfronts in those subdivisions requires site plan approval. And that gives us a really good tool to ensure that in the long term, any development of the property is done in a way that's consistent with the environmental impact study that was done to support the subdivision. That kind of tool has got the enforcement capacity behind it that some of the other tools that we've used just lack. So again, we're obviously going through an official plan policy review with the county, and I know that the organization is keen to provide input and has provided input. That may be an opportunity there to improve some of our policies as well. I've kind of gone on a bit here, but I guess I'm not really equipped to give council or to answer a question about what the differences are, say, between the lower tier policies as they stand today.
Jerry, and then Donna.
Thank you, through you, Andy. I believe education is key. The problem is, how do you get these people educated? Because a lot of people come in from outside, buy up waterfront lots. And although we have a policy that says no clear cutting on shoreline properties, these people come in and that's the first thing they do, and it's done before we find out about it. So, I think it's really important to let these people know the importance of not having the pristine green lawns that are that go right down to the water. Not only do they create phosphorus with the pesticides and the fertilizers, but they also attract geese. And it ends up being a problem for the shoreline owners after the fact. And so I think that's one of the things that we have to look at is how do we get these people educated right from the get-go? Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Donna?
Yes, through you and to the committee members, thank you so much for the presentation. It makes a lot of sense. One thing that has caused problems over the years is that TSW have issued permits for a lot of this Armourstone shoreline. And like Sherry says, it's done before we know anything about it. When we have an opportunity for a site plan, I remember many recommendations from Rob Lamar where they were required to keep a certain percentage of the shoreline naturalized, and we're doing that as much as we can when we have the input. I don't know if Rob has anything to add to that.
Rob?
Yeah, certainly. That would be a reference to those subdivisions where we have site plan control. That's not often the case, certainly in a residential context where we can impose site plan control. But in those three instances, we've got that ability, and so we can insist on the fact that the development of the property be consistent entirely with the environmental impact study, which severely limits the hardening of the shoreline. Actually, in all three instances, you're not permitted to harden the shoreline at all. So, so in that context, the applicant provides us with a detailed site plan, which depicts just how much of the property is going to be altered in terms of tree removal, and we limit it to essentially their needs, right? So they need to put a house on the property, they need a septic system and a small area for activities, but beyond that, the trees are to remain, and they can have a small viewscape to the lake, and beyond that, the lots are to remain in their natural state. And of course, that's consistent with the environmental impact study that was completed in support of the application. So, in the absence of that kind of tool, the site plan approval tool, it's hard to ensure that these things remain in the long term, right? So now each of these lots are subject to these agreements that are on title, available to any future purchaser, and we can, if there's a breach, it's a breach of an agreement, then we have some authority to litigate that. So.
Thank you, Rob. Jerry?
Thank you. Through you to Mike. So excluding White Lake, I would believe, wouldn't be part of the TSW purview. But what would you say to the TSW and Orca, who would be issuing the permits for the shorelines when they're the keepers of the shoreline, but yet they keep issuing the permits, and then you want us to do something when really they would trump it? So I guess the question is, what do you say to Orca and the TSW regarding these shorelines and the allowing of it?
So was that a question for me? I'm sorry, I'm really having trouble hearing council now.
Yes, it was. So the question was, what do you say to Orca and TSW, who are supposed to be the keepers of the lands along the water, when they keep issuing the permits?
Sure. Well, I'm happy to take a run at that one. I think, this area is kind of a complicated landscape because you have, unlike a lot of places across Ontario, we have the Trent Severn Waterway. Typically, a lot of inland lakes, it is actually the province that owns the bed of the waterway, the bed of the lake. So it's, you're adding another layer here. And a lot of Ontario's lake country doesn't have conservation authorities. So it's an opportunity. It just involves enhanced coordination because you have these other agencies with capacity. But like many, they're stretched. And I think, it's just got to be a coordinated effect. I've talked to a number of folks at TSW over the years about this issue, and there's certainly willingness and desire to have a more proactive policy and have some regulations. In the case of TSW, it requires a federal act. And so and the federal government sees the province typically as kind of land is the purview of the province. So I think it's something that requires some coordination and some degree of leadership, I think, by all three parties, frankly, to make it work. And that can be challenging, but I don't think it's impossible. Ultimately, though, the land base is the purview of the municipality legally. And Trans Severn Waterway only deals with the high water mark down. And there's some nuanced places where that's not quite where the water line is, but at the long and short is the leadership is required at the municipal level to make it work. And some coordination, I think, by the conservation authorities and by TSW would be my kind of just response as a citizen, as a waterfront owner, and as a planner who's kind of traveled this province and seen this in different contexts.
And if I could just follow up, Mike, when you guys presented to Orca, what was their reaction? What did they have to say?
Yeah, so we haven't had an official presentation to Tonabee Conservation, but I have spoken to some of their staff, and there's a willingness to develop some kind of a shoreline policy bylaw of sorts and do that in cooperation with member municipalities. I know there's definitely a willingness, and there's several suggestions on a pathway. So I'm optimistic that that could work. And so I think, again, I wouldn't hold up for Trans Severn Waterway. I really think it's something that the municipalities, and I would say, your township's going through official plans, so is the county. Let's kind of look at it, and maybe that's something for next time. I don't want to keep people here all night on this item, but let's look at a plan and a timeline for how we could roll that out and dovetail it in with official plan process, both Selwyn and the county and the other lower tiers who rely on the county for that leadership. And certainly wherever Orca applies, they're, I think, a key kind of partner in this. That's my impression. Again, as just a citizen, a simple citizen, and a planner in my spare time.
Okay, I'm going to ask, throw a question out there. I don't know whether you want to take it or one of your colleagues does, but there's no question that the regulatory regime that exists over development is important, and I understand you're going to be back to talk a little bit more about that in January. But beyond that, there's I think a responsibility on the part of the landowner themselves to be good stewards of that which they own. And that's got to be a fundamental part of it, because you can set all the rules that you want, but there has to be a fundamental willingness on the part of folks to be good stewards. And I asked the question, is the challenge a lack of information that people, in terms of knowing the types of practices that they should be? Is the intensity level just so big that it's difficult to try to address it? Or have we now have practices that are such that people just follow them because that's what their neighbor has done? I'm not trying to set aside the regulatory part. That's an important part, but I'm just trying to have an understanding of the stewardship part and what can be done to enhance that component of it.
Well, I would say, Your Worship, to council, my own impression of it again is then to be clear, I've worked in the conservation sector, but I've really come to my life and career with a real estate background and a family that's built mills and marinas and done real estate development all in different parts of this province. So I would just say kind of a little bit of conjecture on this might be, it's got to be the full package altogether, right? And so an understanding that these are the kind of terms we're working with. In a lot of cases, people are buying properties or redeveloping them with the impression that it's easier and cheaper to do it this way, and to get the necessary equipment in. It's easier to just remove all the trees and start from scratch, right? And there's worry about erosion and these kind of concerns. And so I think it is the full picture of education a little bit of values, and certainly regulation. And if there isn't kind of that coordination on all three, I think we end up with exactly what we're seeing now, right? So, and that's the trend. So my suggestion is I think we need enhanced effort on kind of all three of those areas. And, you know, we've got, the good thing is you have pretty active communities now, right? I was president of a simple little road association of 60 properties for the past 3 years. And, you know, we mobilized a fair bit of people on different issues. And there's those channels are there now with more and more people making these their year-round home or kind of half the year places. So I think that education can be done, but it's got to lead to something. There has to also be kind of a policy background to it. I think that whole picture is what part of what kind of Roz and Rob and the Environment Council are trying to now push forward, which I think is a good thing. And that's why I've kind of signed up to see if I can help a little bit here.
Okay, well, thank you very much. So I understand you're going to be back in January for another presentation. And so I will ask if somebody wants to receive, yes, Anita and Donna, to receive this presentation. All those in favor? Okay. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate the information and we look forward to seeing you in the new year. Good night. Okay, colleagues, move on. Madam Clerk, is there anybody registered in question period?
No questions.
Thank you. We'll move on to our municipal officers and staff reports. For direction, we have the salt management plan. Is Rick on the line? Rick, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Sure can.
Yeah, I'm looking for the council to endorse our salt management plan. We had to do the salt management plan because of the drinking water source protection in Lakefield, where we get the water, where the water intake is there. Terry Cox from Orca gave us lots of help with this, and I do appreciate all she's done. Anyways, it's pretty well self-explanatory. I didn't know if any of us had any questions.
Okay, Sherry.
Move the recommendation.
Jerry, second it. Any discussion? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm assuming this salt management plan is a new thing, but the drinking water source protection plan has been in place for a number of years. So I'm just wondering, was it the drinking water source protection plan group that has now brought this requirement forward, or is it something that I guess is just a new policy or regulation?
No, it's there. The Ontario government had a salt management plan. If your community used more than 500 tons of salt a year, you had to do it. We always fell short of that. We never used that. And the township of Selwyn doesn't use straight salt on the roads or the sidewalks. So we don't use a lot of salt. We mainly use it to keep the sand from freezing. But the drinking water protection is what initiated this, that's for sure.
We have a mover and a seconder. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you, Rick.
Thanks.
We have consent items. Who would like to pull a consent item? Donna.
5B.
5B. Yeah. Anybody else? I'm going to ask for 6.2. So after that, we'll go to 5B, which is the work plan for the Accessibility Committee.
Yes.
Go ahead, Donna.
Okay. I read it, and this would be directed to Angie. It indicated that the committee would be touring the Lakefield Community Garden, which is a raised garden bed project. And I just think that possibly that they should consider inspecting the Ennismore Secret Garden, and maybe you would have some, as it has started, they have started some planting, and would probably be good for the accessibility committee to get in there early and make sure that they're thinking about accessibility.
That's a great idea, and we'll definitely add that to the work plan. I'm sure the committee would be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Is that it, Alan? Okay. I just wanted to, is Lane on the line? Do we know? Okay, thanks. So 6.2 is the AMO policy update based on the fall economic statement. And so I just had a couple of questions to Lane. The Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund, Lane took the opportunity at our capital meeting to project where that's going with the doubling of that money. I wanted to ask though, on their third bullet, first of all, where they talk about they're not going to be redoing the property assessment. And I'm just curious as to Lane's view as to whether that's going to have a financial impact on us.
To you, Mr. Chair, I think it's difficult for me to say without seeing the actual document that they're going to lay out to us. They typically provide us with a workbook that outlines where that's coming from. They do that with the UMP funding and they do it with BOSIP as well. And so I just haven't seen any of the detail of the new format yet.
So in that same vein, then I think we need to stand by. They've also, they're amending the on-farm business property assessment, changing the threshold from 50 to 100,000. So I guess that as well, it would take you some time to figure out whether that's going to have a financial impact on the township.
It would, Mr. Chair, although that doesn't affect us based on our assessment role the way it is right now. That wouldn't have a significant impact on us.
Okay, thank you. I didn't hear that. And the last note that I made here was on the staycation tax credit. And so I was just going to suggest it's not so much for Lane, but for Angie, that as part of our marketing program, that we may want to incorporate that as part of our encouragement for people to be visiting our communities. Okay, that takes care of that. So there's nothing else that's being pulled. So a motion to accept all of the consent items, Sherry and Anita, all those in favor, that's carried. There are no petitions, so we'll go to portfolio updates and we'll start with Donna.
Thank you very much. I'll start with the link. I just have the statistics for November the 8th to the 12th. Route 31, which is the Curve Lake Lakefield, 142 ridership, and Route 32, Ennismore Bridge North, is down to 116. Remember last time it was up over 200, which I'm not sure how that happened. I wanted to ask Angie a question. I got a spreadsheet this time, and it showed the number of rides on each day of the week. And Saturday and Sunday were 0, but I didn't know whether the bus even ran on Saturday and Sunday.
No, we don't operate on the weekend.
So that's why.
That's correct. That's why it's 0.
Okay.
Yep.
I would explain that.
And I don't know if council knows, but apparently our fire chief injured himself at home, and he'll be off work for a while recuperating. So he might appreciate some cards or emails. And on to the library. Our silent auction was very successful. We raised over $6,000, and we're thinking about doing it in maybe a couple of years because it was a lot of staff and committee time doing it. The only way they would do it more often is if they could get a bigger committee from the library board, which might not be a problem because it was a good moneymaker. And it was a lot of work for the technology person, Heidi, who had to take the photographs and organize everything and do the printouts for explaining each item, but it was very successful. And we had a rec meeting, I think a couple of weeks ago. We mainly discussed the meeting that would be happening in the new year regarding the ice allocation policy, but nothing definitive was decided or done because it was made very clear that we had to have all stakeholders at the table before we made any decisions or move forward with anything. And that's it.
Thank you, Donna. Sherry?
Thank you to you. The County Awards and Bursaries Committee, where I'm a member of it, it has foregone the county awards this year because of COVID. And instead, they've teamed up with the city, Curve Lake, Hiawatha First Nations to have a frontline worker recognition called My COVID Champion. People are encouraged to nominate someone who has gone above and beyond to help others during the pandemic. It's a 4-week campaign. I understand something will go on our next agenda, but that's 2 weeks from now. So I wanted to give as much notice as possible and encourage people to nominate someone. And both the nominee and the nominated will have a chance to win one of 8 locally sourced gift baskets, and the value of each is $250. So it's something that there are a lot of people out there who have really done a lot of work during the pandemic to make life easier for others, and they all deserve recognition. So I hope people take the time to send in nomination. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Anita?
I don't have much. Our accessibility committee meeting is, which was to be held tomorrow, has been canceled because we didn't have much on the agenda. So we'll be meeting again in January. We have a heritage committee meeting on Thursday. We'll be looking at, we received a designation brief, and we've been filling out our scoring matrices. So we'll be discussing that on Thursday. And if you get a chance to go through Lakefield, you'll see that the Lakefield Village Lions have created a winter wonderland at Cenotaph Park, and it's quite lovely.
It is. Sherry?
Thank you, sir. Public Works, they got their first taste of winter yesterday, so a little bit of sand out there. They're still doing culverts to make sure that everything's good, and a little bit of gravel in the pit right now. As for Park and Rec, I'd like to reiterate what Donna had said regarding the meeting for the ice allocation, although I would say, Donna said it was made quite clear, I would say extremely clear that we will not do anything until, or make comment or make decisions prior to that meeting. And like I said, I think it was made crystal clear to those involved in that committee. The arena operations continue to go smoothly, and the senior skating is now fully sponsored, and the canteen, and they've got good numbers there, and the canteen will open in December over in Ennismore. And that's it from my team.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I forgot to mention that Mike and Miles' hometown holiday tour, Pure Country 105, will be stopping in the village of Lakefield 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. This coming, well, Thursday, November 25th. Yeah, that's this Thursday. And so there's music and broadcast truck to connect you with local shops and restaurants, events, sights, and sounds. Anyway, so that's this Thursday morning from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m.
Thank you. On my portfolio, just a couple things on public health. So as I'm sure everybody's aware, the vaccine for children 5 to 11 has been approved. The booking system opened up today. The first clinic will be next Monday. There are lots of resources for parents to get information if they have questions about the vaccine, and there'll be a proactive education piece that's happening during December. Case counts across the province have been increasing, And that has happened here locally as well. So today we have 34 active cases and 128 close contacts. I think the more interesting statistic is in the last 3 weeks, this would be ending on Sunday night. We've had 75 cases. The 3 weeks before that, we had 39 cases. So you can see we're having an increase. It's not the dramatic increases that we have seen in the past, but it's steadily going up. The vaccination numbers here locally, these are, when we do our meetings on Tuesday, they're 6 days out of date because they're published on Wednesdays, but as of last week, we had 87.3% of eligible individuals, that would be people 12 and over, had received one dose, 84.5 had 2 doses, and at 12.7 had not chosen to be vaccinated at all. One of the things that I just wanted to point out, and there's lots of statistics from this study, but they did a study in Ontario for the period September 30th to October 29th. In Ontario, during that period, there were 13,256 new cases of COVID. Of that, during that period, or as that period ended, 22.8% of individuals in Ontario were not vaccinated. So this is the entire population. So it's not just the eligible population. So 22.8% were unvaccinated. Of that 22.8%, 63% of the cases were in those 22%. 72% of the hospitalizations were in that 22%, and 82% of the ICU admissions were in that area. So there is a much higher preponderance of both the disease as well as the severity in terms of hospitalization and ICU in individuals who are unvaccinated as opposed to individuals who are vaccinated. So that's tonight as we speak. On the county side, there's a PEC taking place on the causeway work and on our Yankee line work. There is, because clearly as much as we try, we can't be in 2 places at once. There is a deck that's being, that you can access that goes through it all. So if you want, I would encourage folks to do that. And the county has begun its budgeting process last week, and we will go through that over the next couple of months as well. So that's all I had to add online. And if I, yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Is there a reason why public health doesn't release the sort of the ages of, so like, for instance, these 4 or 5 new cases that they're talking about now? I know that they've declared there's a case at TAS. I think I was reading that today, that there's a case at TAS. Is there a reason that public health doesn't break down the new cases by, you know, even age categories within, say, a 5 or 10 year span? You know, are they, these new cases, are they, you know, over 80 or, you know, between 50 and 70 or, you know, children or whatever? Is there a reason why they don't break it down? Because I think that would be helpful.
There are some breakdowns that are provided. I'm just going to the website right now. And I'm just checking here. So I'm doing this as we speak here. So, but let me get that for you because there is some data. The general rule, though, is public health will not release data that could make it so that you can identify a particular individual. That's a general rule of thumb that they operate under. So they won't compromise an individual's private health records by the information they report. So they report aggregate information. Well, I understand what you're saying, and let me find out for you because I know when we do our report to the media every 2 weeks, there is age bands that are reported. Yeah, there is. So I will get you the last report Okay, anything else? No? Okay, so under other new and unfinished business, we have, there was a report on our media campaign. Angie, did you want to?
No, just there to provide the information on the advertising campaign. It's going very well.
Yes, I've heard our ads. It's great.
Actually, through you, there are residents who have commented and it's all good. People really enjoy it.
Any other business that anybody wants to bring up? Not seeing any, we will go to the bylaws. So we have the building bylaw. We have the development agreement for 525 Lindsay, and we have the merger agreement for Lot 21 Concession 9. And a mover for all those, Anita, seconded by Jerry. All those in favor are confirming bylaw. Sherry is, and Donna, all those in favor, and adjournment. Jerry and Donna, all those in favor. We're adjourned. Staff, thank you very much, and thank you to council. And we will.